One man once made gold itself worthless. Not in a legend, not in a story told to frighten kings. In the year 1324, a single traveler crossed into Egypt and gave away so much gold that its price collapsed across cities, across markets, across an entire region, and it would not recover for 12 years. He wasn't waging war. He wasn't plundering anyone. He was simply passing through, handing gold to the poor, to merchants, to anyone who crossed his path. His generosity was so vast that it broke the economy of half the medieval world. His name was Mansa Musa, and he may have been the richest human being who has ever lived. To understand how one man could carry that much wealth, you have to understand the land he ruled. In the 14th century, the Mali Empire stretched across West Africa, a territory larger than Western Europe, reaching from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahara, and beneath it lay two of the most valuable substances in the medieval world. Two stones that built the entire economy. The first was gold. The mines of Bambouk and Bure produced it in quantities Europe could only dream of. At a time when the kingdoms of the north were starved for precious metal, Mali had so much that gold dust was used like ordinary currency in its markets. The second was salt. And if you followed this channel, you already know how strange that sounds. In the Sahara, salt was so scarce it was traded ounce for ounce against gold. Caravans hauled great slabs of it south from the desert mines of Takaza, and merchants exchanged it, weight for weight, with the gold of the south. Gold flowing north, salt flowing south. And sitting astride that exchange, taxing every caravan that crossed, was the Mali Empire. This was the engine of its fortune, not conquest, but control of the one trade route that the entire region depended on. And the man who inherited that engine around the year 1312 was Mansa Musa. Mansa was not his name, it was his title. It meant King of Kings, Emperor. And by every account that survives, he ruled well. He expanded Mali's borders. He secured its trade routes. He brought order to a vast and difficult land. But here is the strange thing. For all his power, almost no one outside Africa had ever heard of him. To the merchants of Cairo, to the scholars of Damascus, to the mapmakers of Europe, the empire of Mali was a rumor at the edge of the known world, a place where gold was said to grow like carrots in the ground. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, and like every Muslim who has the means, he was bound by his faith to make the pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in his life, the Hajj. So in the year 1324, he decided to go. But the gold was only half the story, because the way Mansa Musa chose to make that journey would turn a private act of worship into one of the most extraordinary displays of wealth in human history. He did not travel quietly. According to the chroniclers who recorded it years later, Mansa Musa's caravan numbered in the tens of thousands, by some accounts as many as 60,000 people. Soldiers, officials, servants, wives, an entire moving court, crossing thousands of miles of desert. Ahead of the column walked hundreds of attendants, and the writers of the age claimed that each one carried a staff of solid gold. Behind them came a train of camels, dozens upon dozens of them, and every camel is said to have carried hundreds of pounds of gold dust. We should be honest, these numbers come from chroniclers writing after the fact, and they may have grown in the telling. But even if we cut them in half, even if we cut them to a fraction, what crossed the desert that year was a fortune so large that no single person had ever moved that much wealth across the earth at one time. And everywhere this river of gold passed, it gave. Mansa Musa built mosques in the towns he rested in. He gave gold to the poor he met along the road. He paid for everything, for everyone, in pure gold. It was breathtaking. It was pious. It was generous beyond imagining. And it was about to cause a disaster. In July of 1324, the caravan reached Cairo, then one of the greatest cities on earth. the beating heart of the Islamic world. Mansa Musa stayed for 3 months, and during those 3 months, he did what he had done the entire journey, only more so. He gave gold to officials, he gave gold to merchants, he gave gold to the poor in the streets. He spent so lavishly in the markets that the city had never seen anything like it. There was just one problem, and it is a problem that every economist would recognize today. When you flood a market with any commodity, its value falls. And Mansa Musa flooded Cairo with gold. So much gold entered the city in those 3 months that the metal itself lost its worth. The price of gold in Egypt crashed. Merchants who had stored their wealth in gold watched it shrink in value almost overnight. This is not a legend. An Egyptian scholar named Al-Umari, visiting Cairo 12 years after Mansa Musa had come and gone, wrote that the people still spoke of him, and that the price of gold in the city had still not fully recovered. 12 years. A single visitor had accidentally triggered something close to a regional depression in the value of gold, and the wound took more than a decade to heal. He had not meant to do it. He had meant only to be generous, to honor his faith and his God. But generosity, at that scale, is indistinguishable from economic force. One man passing through had moved a market the way a war or a famine moves a market. When he understood what he had done, the chroniclers say he even tried to repair it, borrowing back gold from Cairo's lenders at high interest on his return journey to pull some of it out of circulation. The richest man in the world, trying to unspill the ocean he had poured. When he finally came home, he did something that would outlast every coin he had ever given away. The pilgrimage changed Mansa Musa. He had seen the great cities of the East, their mosques, their libraries, their scholars. And he came home determined to make Mali not just rich, but radiant. He brought back with him an architect, a man from Andalusia named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. And in the city of Timbuktu, on the southern edge of the Sahara, they began to build. Timbuktu became one of the wonders of the age. Mansa Musa raised the great Jingareba Mosque there, its walls shaped from sun-dried earth, studded with wooden beams, an architecture made of the desert itself that still stands 700 years later. He founded mosques and schools. He drew scholars, jurists, and poets from across the Islamic world. Within a few generations, Timbuktu held one of the most important centers of learning on the planet. Its libraries gathered tens of thousands of manuscripts on law, astronomy, medicine, mathematics. Trade in gold had built the empire. But Mansa Musa used that gold to buy something gold cannot mine: knowledge. This was his true monument, not the staffs of gold that dazzled Cairo. Those were spent and scattered within a generation. But the city of learning he raised in the sand endured and made the name Timbuktu a byword for centuries, for the farthest, richest, most mysterious place a person could imagine. And here is the final irony of Mansa Musa's gold. He had crossed the desert to worship, but by emptying his treasury across Egypt, he had done something no African ruler had managed before. He had made the wider world see Mali. Word of the king who gave away mountains of gold spread from Cairo across the Mediterranean into the courts and counting houses of Europe. And in the year 1375, half a century after the pilgrimage, a mapmaker in Spain drew one of the most famous maps of the medieval age, the Catalan Atlas. On it, deep in West Africa, he painted a black king seated on a throne, a golden crown on his head, holding up a single enormous nugget of gold. Beside him, the mapmaker wrote that this was the richest and most noble ruler in all that land, because of the abundance of gold that is gathered in his country. That king was Mansa Musa. For the first time, Europe had put the empire of Mali on the map, and the reason was a fortune so large it had crashed a foreign economy 50 years earlier and still echoed in the stories merchants told. Which leaves the question this whole story has been circling. Was he truly the richest person who ever lived? The honest answer is that we will never know. You cannot convert 14th century gold into modern dollars with any real precision, and the chronicler's numbers can't be trusted to the coin. Some modern writers have thrown out figures in the hundreds of billions. Those numbers are guesses dressed as facts. But here is what we can say, and it may be the more remarkable claim. Mansa Musa is perhaps the only person in recorded history whose personal wealth was so large that simply by spending it, he changed the price of the most precious metal on earth across an entire region. Not a nation's treasury, not an empire's army, one man's purse. Whether or not he was the richest in raw total, he is almost certainly the richest whose fortune we can measure by the damage it did, just by being spent. But this is gold and ruin. And gold, in this story as in every other, does not stay. Mansa Musa died around the year 1337 after a reign of roughly 25 years, and the empire he left behind, the largest, richest, most dazzling state West Africa had ever produced, did not hold. His successors could not match him. Civil wars broke out over the throne. The trade routes that had been Mali's lifeblood began to slip from its control. Rival peoples pressed in from the desert and the savannah. The Songhai Empire rose in Mali's place, and in time swallowed the very cities, Timbuktu among them, that Mansa Musa had made famous. The gold was still in the ground. The mines of Bambouk and Bura had not run dry. But the empire that had channeled that gold, taxed it, and turned it into power. That empire dissolved within a few generations of his death. It is the oldest lesson this channel keeps finding, told now in gold dust instead of salt or silver or tulips. Wealth on that scale can build an empire, raise a city of scholars, and reach across a continent to put your name on a foreign map. It can do almost anything. The one thing it cannot do is hold itself in place. Mansa Musa gave away so much gold that he broke its price for 12 years. Within 12 years more, the empire that gold had built was already beginning to break too. The gold outlived the king. The city outlived the gold. But the empire outlived neither.